I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today I'm joined by Andrew Drasen. He is the author of A Vision of Hope and is the creator of a 90-day framework that helps people discover identity, clarify direction, and build purpose-driven lives. His mission is to help people see not just who they are, but who they can become, transforming pain into growth and purpose. He's got a very wild story, and I am so excited to have him on to share it with me. So, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to sit down and or stand, stand up and walk. If people don't know, he's walking around. So, I said sit down. But thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to hear your story.
Thanks for having me, Noah. I'm glad to be here.
So, if you could, feel free to introduce yourself and just tell my listeners a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Drasen. I'm from Wisconsin. I battled addiction and incarceration for my late teens and pretty much my entire 20s. The book was born during my last period of incarceration and the treatment that came afterwards, which was my final treatment in 2019. I actually set a goal to finish writing it by the time I was released, and I finished it 5 minutes before I got out. So that was kind of clutch to be able to hit that goal. So yeah, now then I ended up getting released. I life got in the way. I worked some other jobs. I was in sales for a bit. I did car sales for about 4 years, and anyone who's been in car sales knows that there's not much room for much else outside of work. It requires a lot of your time and just being there. Transition to solar sales. I actually lost half of the book. I had it in two separate folders because the way that it's structured, there are chapters which look back on my life, and then journal entries which chronicled my period through incarceration and the treatment that came afterwards, along with the topic entries, which later became the companion book of Vision of Hope Reflections. So I ended up losing that folder, and I found it at my dad's house. So I kind of took that as a sign and really got to work. So the vision kind of spawned from there. So I guess that's a brief overview of who I am and where I am.
Yeah, I mean, just off that intro, you mentioned some of that stuff, and I can't wait to kind of dive into more of your story. Kind of going back, talking about, tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up and how kind of addiction kind of started controlling your life a little bit.
Yeah. So my I guess my younger childhood, addiction wasn't so much rampant, but alcohol use was. And at holidays, my grandfather, he was a functioning alcoholic. Like he never missed work, and he was a foreman for Case Tractors, and had a good job. But alcohol was it made him ugly a lot of times. Drink one was usually fine. Drink two, he'd start snipping at someone, and then drink three, and all bets were off. So it really kind of taught me about avoidance. A lot of times we'd end up leaving early, and my mom and my dad were in tears, or my mom was in tears, my dad consoling her. And, like I was just kind of left to figure it out on my own. And so I began experimenting with drugs and alcohol probably around age 12, age 11, something like that. Started with drinking and then smoking weed. They started around the same time. I don't really recall which came first, drinking or smoking, but around age 12, high school use progressed pretty substantially. I went to a smaller middle school. It was about 500 students, and it was a middle and high school combined. And there was like an application process. You had to shadow a current student, and they had to give a recommendation on whether you attend or not. And so I ended up switching schools for high school and went from 500 students to 3,000 students. So it was quite a big shift. And I started smoking weed quite a bit more. Um, as soon as I got my license, pretty much, I started selling weed. Then it graduated to pills, and then to sniffing heroin, to injecting heroin, well, that's pretty much where it ended. But and that's really what started my battle with the legal system. Is to support my habit, I'd sell. I'd just buy more. All of my friends were using what I was using, so I'd just buy more, get a better price, and sell to my friends. And that led to prison sentences, and banging my head over and over until I finally got it. So
Even hearing that story and not even having to hear everything else is so impactful of showing that people can, even if they're at their darkest times and even at a young age, that you can overcome it. Um, Share with me a little bit about what kind of led to you being incarcerated, and what was it like being behind bars?
Um, well, the first time I was locked up quite a few times. The first time I was arrested at school, and they found a bunch of drugs in the car. I just turned 17, and I was kind of almost numb. Like I really didn't think much other than fuck. Here we go. um, and so that was kind of a surreal experience too, because in the Racine County Jail, you could see through to other pods that are on the same um, like floor as you're on. So I was on 2D, 4D. I don't recall which that time, but and across the way, I could see at the time my sister's husband, and so they actually, whoever the guard was, let him come over into my pod, which anyone who's ever been in jail knows that's kind of like a no-no, like to let an inmate from another pod go into another pod, because if anything were to happen, there would be a lot of questions raised. But he's like, dude, what happened? I got caught with drugs. And he bought me a Pepsi. They had soda and vending machines in the jail at that time, and I was in jail for 3 days until my parents bonded me out, and that was the first time I was in jail. And then the second time was a bit longer of a stay. It was like a couple of months, but I really didn't know going in how long it would be. And that time I just kind of fell in with some older guys who were just kind of like more relaxed and played cards all day and learned to play spades and hearts and back alley, and all of those jail card games, and got my first taste of working out and exercising. And that kind of broke the I don't know if I want to say like fear, but the apprehension of going to jail, because like I didn't have a choice. I was in there for a couple of months, and then I'd get out and I'd use again, and I'd end up back in jail, and then I graduated, getting a delivery charge, which landed me in prison, and then there was another case where I was set up really, but and I was looking at a decade at that period, and that was a tough time. That the first couple of weeks, that like I just wake up and I'd feel these pangs of anxiety, like it would all come flooding over me, like, oh my God, like, and I fought on that one, and I ended up getting about 2 years, give or take a little bit, on that sentence. But the last period being locked up, that's what I mean. There were a couple of things that really kind of changed it for me. One was a previous relationship where it just kind of gave me a taste of a different life for myself, and like is the first person I ever truly loved. And then I ended up getting locked up. I relapsed, and that caused the end of that relationship. But at that point, I wanted to get clean for me. So I had a year clean at that point. I did end up relapsing and overdosing, which landed me in jail in that last treatment, and I ended up getting out of that in July of 2019, and I finished my probation in June of 2020, and haven't looked back since. I mean, I've changed my life completely. I got that job in sales. I ended up buying a condo. I got a dog. I was engaged. We were together for 5.5 years, and tragically, she committed suicide in July. She's also a recovering addict, and battled bipolar disorder and major depressive disorder, and was having an episode, and undergoing a medication change, and made a decision that she can't take back. So really, if anything, that's there was obviously a grieving period, and like I didn't get anything done for like weeks. And but then I kind of realized, there's no better way to honor her than to help people who have dealt with similar issues than what she's dealing with, or dealt with, or what I dealt with. And so that just furthered my cause and my mission to, I've launched a 90-day curriculum that I'm in talks with various treatment centers and reentry organizations about licensing and implementing. I'm going to record the curriculum and create a virtual school community for just anyone who's looking for growth and purpose and direction for their life. So like where the memoir, and the entire curriculum is based around the trio of books, the memoir, which tells what happened, what I thought when it happened, what I felt when it happened. The Reflections companion book distills the lessons learned and the wisdom gained from those experiences. And then there's the workbook that helps turn it into practical applications for people to internalize it and use it as a tool for growth. One phrase that I really like is, smart men learn from their own mistakes, wise men learn from the mistakes of others. So, yeah, that's essentially, where I'm at with everything at the moment.
And even sharing that story, you have so much resilience in sharing it. I just can't fathom how much you've gone through in life at such a young age too. It's, I send my condolences to you about your fiance. I'm so sorry to hear that. I can't imagine what that's like. But for you to be able to come on here and share and open up and be so powerful and vocal about it is so inspiring to me, and I know it'll be inspiring to others. People always I don't see know how people can really and share these stories and not cry. Whereas me, on the other hand, I'll call my friends, be like, "This is such an awful day," and they're like, "Noah, what's wrong?" I was like, "I have a splinter," and I'm like, and they're like, "You called me for that? You called me for a damn splinter in your finger?" So you just you your motivation is so impactful, and you started writing this book. I read in your bio while you were sitting in jail. Did writing the book kind of help kind of cope with the realization of how your life was at that time?
Yeah, I mean that was it was definitely an experience writing it. I mean, I'd sit for hours a day every single day and just write, and there's no Microsoft Word or printer or anything. This was all handwritten, and that just kind of added to the process. Um, but yeah, it was a very healing experience. I mean, it was the first tears that I shed for my grandma Drasen. It was the first tears that I shed for my grandfather, who I was incarcerated when he passed. So that was kind of an experience. I don't even know if I'd say it's an experience. Like I was almost numb to it, like I heard the news, but it wasn't real at the time. All I knew was all that was around me, and it even after release, it was just like he was just gone. I didn't even really grieve until I wrote that book. So, and rewriting every part, I relived all of it. I was right back there, and I could see it in my mind's eye, and I just relived my entire life. So it was a very cathartic experience.
What's been the biggest lesson you've learned as from writing? What's been the biggest thing you've learned about writing this book?
From writing or about writing?
Let's do both. From writing and
Okay, so from writing the book, um, the biggest thing that I learned is that it doesn't matter how far down you've fallen, as long as there's air in your lungs, there is still hope. But it all starts with your mindset. You have to believe there is hope, otherwise there is no hope. And if I firmly believe that our perception creates our reality. The way that we see the world, it matters. If we view everything that happens as negative and just the world is a terrible place, that's all we're gonna get. I believe that our frequency, for lack of a better word, it attracts, attracts like. So what we're putting out into the world is what we're going to attract back. So then about writing the book, I learned that persistence is a practice at first. So, like I said, I'd have to sit down and write for hours and hours every single day, and this was 6 months, so it was definitely a laborious task. But if you have a purpose to what you do, resilience is a lot easier. It's a natural byproduct because like then work doesn't feel like work. It feels like what your purpose is, what you're supposed to be doing. So I guess those would be what I learned from writing the book and about writing the book.
do you think the book has more powerful meaning having it being that you wrote the whole book while you were incarcerated compared to if you had sat down at a desk to write it?
Absolutely, 100%. Because like even the structure, the chapters look back at my life, and then there are interwoven journal entries which chronicled my period from being locked up through my entire time right before release. So it helped me to. It was like a live journal, it helped me to process what was going on around me and to pull out lessons from it. And I don't know if I would have done that had I not been writing the book during that period. I don't know if I would have had the depth to me. I think that was a period of evolution in my own right. So
So after you were released from prison, associate you and me were kind of talking about this before we started about the process of it getting published. What made you want to share this story with the public and make it into a book to where people could read it? What was that mindset like for you when you decided to do that?
well, I'd always been a gifted writer. Like ever since my mom was a gifted writer, my sister was excel or was a fluent, at writing. So it was always a passion of mine. But as I was writing the book, I'd share different passages with different inmates, and just the results that I got were very impactful. Um, so much so that my counselor, while I was in the treatment, my counselor. So we had these community meetings where each community, which would be held once a week, um, it would a different date or a different cell would host it, and you'd cover a variety of different things. There was like a topic and like a quote and like a news article of the week and like a discussion. And so for my part of it, I read one of the entries that I wrote for the book, and I ended up getting um, standing ovation, and actually two of them. So, and it was afterwards, maybe 20, 30 minutes after community ended, my counselor at the time, she pulled me into the office and asked if I'd deliver the commencement speech. And she said that usually inmates or participants, offenders, whatever word you want to use, who had warnings weren't allowed to give the speech, but given what I just shared, she thought that I'd be able to leave everyone with something impactful. So I ended up giving the speech, and the just impact that other people tell me that my writing has had, it made me want to share it. Like my story can be a warning sign for those who may be headed down that road, or it can be a light out for folks who are already there.
Everyone has that gift where they can write, but some people just have it better than others do. If you, because I've read some books that have awful vocabulary in it, and I've also read books that have outstanding word choices to where it kind of makes you feel and has a good meaning. So if you're a good writer and people are really appreciative of that, it's such a huge kind of a thing that you feel kind of humble about, because maybe you could write something that's to yourself garbage, you don't like any of the words, and then you have someone read it and they're like, oh, that's the best thing I've ever read. And I think when you hear reviews back about the writing in it was so great, it was like um so I could like picture it. I always say if you can picture something really well, it's written very well. As if I can picture it and I can really, really picture it all together. Um, before we had started talking, were saying that the publishing aspect was something that, a lot of authors don't really share. So tell me a little bit about the process that you've experienced when it comes to having this book published.
Yeah, so I'm self-publishing. I ended up starting a publishing company specifically for it. It's a much more intensive process than I realized, and especially having had handwritten it. So the first thing I had to do was transfer all of the handwritten to a digital format. Then I had to go through the editing process, which I self-edited 6 times. So that was a process, basically reading it through 6 different times and making edits. Then there's the formatting process. So what I used for that was a tool called Atticus, and it helps with the formatting. But even then, you still when you upload the file, you still have to go in and clean it up so it will look good as a finished book. Then there's buying ISBNs for it, which is essentially like serial numbers for books. There's buying barcodes, which you don't have to do, but if you can, you probably should. And there's registering with the Library of Congress to get an LCCN number, which is basically for cataloging for libraries and bookstores and things like that. There's setting up all of your author profiles and all of these ancillary tools that you need that you don't realize going in. And so that's one thing that I'm glad that I did was that I started a business and I got a business credit card and business line of credit. And because I honestly, I wish I had more. I wish I had a larger budget. But we make do with what we got. So um, yeah, then it's kind of three different processes. The first is writing it, then the second is getting it ready for distribution, and then the third is marketing the book. Because you could have the best product in the world, but if no one knows about it, then what good is it doing? So
Right.
and that's where if you're going to launch right, you're going to want a budget for that. So um, yeah, it's definitely much more intensive and a lot more to it than I had originally anticipated. And I mean, it's fine. It's fine. Like I don't have a problem doing the work. It's just a lot more than I thought. Then because there's also designing the front and the spine and the back cover and, placing the barcodes and like what I did is I signed on with KDP, which is for Amazon sales. I signed on with Ingram Spark for library and bookstore sales. And I signed on with Lulu Direct for direct sales for like website purchases, things like that. And then there are templates for each one and each format, whether soft cover, hardcover with dust jacket, and with each distributor. So it's a lot of tinkering.
Yeah, something that you had mentioned to me that I didn't know was that some of these platforms you have to have a different design for it. And, I've seen it in stores too, where it's like, oh, here's one design of how it looks, and then there's another one. But that usually is for re-releases as well as like special ones. I've never really heard of like, okay, say you pitch this to like a I've gone blank on stuff. Like on Amazon, you have to have it look like this, but yet if you put it on Apple, it has to look like this.
Well, so it's not like you have to change the entire design, but you might have to like move the text up or like move the logo around because like the trim and the bleed and like the excess that they cut off, it's going to be different. It's going to be different for each distributor. So, while the design itself might not be noticeable, like for instance, for Lulu Direct, I had a much smaller, basically like good area where you want all text and visible images, everything that you want to make sure is seen. So I had to shrink the main text down because it was a smaller area. So, if someone bought from the website, the back text is going to be a little bit smaller than if they bought it from a bookstore or from Amazon. So that's just kind of one example of what I mean.
It's still a very tedious process. And I feel like for me the tedious process for it would be the proofreading and the editing process because you could change it 10 times and you're like, no, I know damn well there's not another mistake in here. You're just making stuff up. You're adding a word and be like, oh, that's not in there. And then you have to go through and edit that whole thing. So I can only imagine what it do you see it as kind of an easier way to be able to be a self-publisher compared to maybe releasing through a major company?
So, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what the goals are because if you release through a major publisher, you're going to be waiting 1 to 2 years for that book to hit bookshelves. You also lose a lot of creative control, also, but you also unload a lot off of your plate, but in exchange for a much smaller percentage. So, whereas if you self-publish, you'll earn a considerable amount more per sale but everything falls on you or on you to outsource. I was tying into this. What was the original question?
It was kind of like, do you find it easier to be a self-publishing author compared to maybe releasing through a major book sharing company?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it just kind of depends on what kind of person you are, you know, because if you're going to self-publish and you're going to self-publish right, then you're going to be working a lot. You know, like this should be probably your main thing. Or at the very least transitioning to your main thing, and your main thing doesn't take a lot of time. So or, I mean, you could just, you know, throw something together and put it out there and, you know, but that's how you end up with a book that has 3 reviews and has 12 sales, you know, and all from family members. So,
Yeah.
it just, there's a lot of different avenues that you can go also. Like, there's a lot of services, like one that I'm using. It's called NetGalley, and it gets early reviews from librarians, bookstore owners, media outlets, things of that nature. There's another one I'm about to sign on with called Edelweiss, which kind of does the same thing, but it also gets it in front of like booksellers in order to get them to like stock your book in stores. Like I'm also calling like local Barnes and Noble and getting the emails for their booksellers. You know, doing podcast outreach. I mean, there's quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm considering signing on with. There's a service called Affluencer, which basically connects like influencers and brands, and I'm considering signing on with them. So there's a lot of different avenues that you could take. It's just, you know, what's going to be most effective for you and your budget and your message. You know, that's gonna play a big role also.
Yeah, the thing with uh, or what I would feel like would happen with these huge things, like if you were signing through with Scholastic or maybe something like those big publishing book things, they'll want you to go on certain interviews. They want you to do this kind of promotion and all this. Where when you're a self-publisher, you'll get to choose whatever platforms and podcast interviews you want to go on. You can have creative control over everything. So I see everyone tends to have different opinions on, oh, I prefer to be to sell with a company versus I want to self-publish. You're gonna get negative and positive on both. But I think it all kind of what you said, it really just depends on the person. And I do appreciate you saying that galley too, because um I'm on there as well. You're gonna get a book nerd moment from me, so bear with me a minute. I The good thing about that is that they kind of come up with um well crap, I've done forgot the damn name. It's a point where people can actually read your book early before you get.
Yep, an advanced reader copy. And if
Yeah,
you're already a member, are you a reader?
I am.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you want to read the book, I'd be happy to send you an advanced reader copy.
So that's okay. Oh, I didn't know. Okay. I'd be more than happy to read it, but that's the powerful of or the benefit of having on be on NetGalley is that these authors and essentially what it is that I didn't even explain it. I just said I'm a huge nerd on there. But what it is that authors can go on these platforms like NetGalley and other platforms as well and sell these advanced reader copies, which people might abbreviations are ARCs. It's kind of what it's been kind of abbreviated down to. It's essentially kind of what he said. It's like a advanced reader copy where the author can either send a book, and it usually is sent. It can be sent physically, but most authors send it digitally through like a PDF file through another source of media, which on NetGalley, I think you can actually read it through the app that they have, but it's a digital form, is what I'm saying. It's a digital way of you reading the book, and then you actually can have people um, read it and they'll leave a review for it before it gets published. And I think that's what a lot of the major retailers use for selling points. They'll take all these reviews that have been left from the ARC readers, and they push that out. So if some you probably have seen like this huge 5-star reviews for books that have only been out for a day, and you're like, well, how in the world has that been out a day? And those are like 10 reviews. chances are there have been people that read it beforehand that gave a 5-star review. So that's kind of how that works, and kind of what that is. So I it's a good thing and a good platform for you to be on, because people, and it's kind of like a giveaway because people can choose to accept it, or then they can choose to decline it. I've been declined for some arcs, and then I was like, rude, but I got approved for some, and then I swear if life didn't take over and I wasn't able to get to read it, so it was like, so I was bummed about it. But um, I'd be interested in reading it if you want to send me something or send it to me. I'd be more than
Yeah,
happy to
just
read it.
after the interview, just send me your email and I'll send you an advanced reader copy. And I'd be more than happy to.
So for the future, do you see yourself being a author of maybe writing some more stories from childhood, or do you see a vision of hope as being kind of like the memoir and you're not going to write again? What's your opinions on?
No, I mean I'm confident that I'll write again. I've already started, my next venture, which is a very different avenue than the Vision of Hope series. And then I also have the concepts down for the next two books after that. So, but first, it's getting this platform and the school curriculum and the curriculum in organizations where it can actually help people. So it's one step at a time. But I'll definitely be writing more.
One of your quotes that you mentioned, and I think this is such a very powerful quote, and it's like, you go by the quote, everyone has something to recover from. Tell me a little bit about that quote and how it's been kind of the role quote that you kind of have run with for your life.
Yeah, it's actually the tagline for A Vision of Hope Media is everyone has something to recover from, and I believe that's very true. It doesn't have to be drug addiction or alcoholism or any kind of addiction. Yeah, it could be past trauma. It could be bullying as a child. It could be a lost dream. Maybe you had a vision for your life and life did not go the way that you had planned, and like we're all grieving and have some kind of trauma to heal from. And really, that's kind of what the curriculum is designed to do, is to help people kind of identify that trauma and identify their strengths and their weaknesses and where they want to go, make an action plan to get there. And then at the end, it zooms out and looks at what kind of legacy do you want to leave? What kind of impact do you want to have on your community? How do you want to be remembered? So hopefully by the end of it, it will get people thinking about, impact and already have a plan in place to make that impact.
For everyone that's been in your life, some people have said, but you've lost a lot of close family and essentially your fiance. If they were here right now, what do you think their reaction to everything that's been going on would be for you?
I mean, I think she'd be proud. I think she'd be proud that I'm carrying on and sorry. Um, and that like that I have a mission and that I'm seeing it through. Like before before she passed, she told me that she just wanted to see me finish something, and like I'm gonna finish this.
I know she's so proud. I know she is. I lost my grandmother when I was 15, so it's hard, but I know that she's looking down. She is so happy and proud of you, and I know she's by your side every step of the way. In spirit, I know she's there. So, um, I know everyone in your life is so proud of you for the life you've lived through, and you've been able to fight this. Most people when they go through this, they lose the battle, they lose the demon that comes from the addiction, they lose the suffering and depression that comes with it. But you're so strong, and I appreciate you opening up the story and kind of showing that emotion right there a little bit, because it shows you how strong and how much this means to you, and how you're fighting for this every day, so it shows so much strength, and you've got so much power in yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Noah. And honestly, like my personal belief is that we all have like immense power within us, um, and it's just kind of attaching to that inner light and letting that guide us in our actions, our interactions, and the words that we speak. And once that burns bright enough, then it can light the way for others.
Someone listening to this has either known somebody or personally has or they've personally dealt with it where they're in recovery, they have a thing with drugs. Whether they're in recovery, if they're feeling stuck, what advice do you have for people that are encouraged to take those first steps of living a better life, whether they feel stuck in recovery, they feel stuck in their career, if they're or just life in general? Because everyone's suffering right now. So, what advice do you have on the first steps that they can take today, to help encourage them for the future?
So I'm going to kind of break that up into two different parts. You said for those who are struggling with alcohol or drugs, depending on how bad it is, you may have to go to detox, and start prepping for that and look for ideally, like I said, depending on how bad it is for you, look for an inpatient treatment, time to get away and to just look inward. If that's not an option, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. But you have to communicate. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be honest with other people about what's going on. No, people can't help you if they don't know what's going on with you. And it all starts with self-honesty. Like only you know if you have a problem or not, and if it's causing negative consequences in your life. For other people who are just like feeling stuck and just want to make a change. First, you need to identify what it is that you're not dissatisfied with in your life. What areas do you want to change? And, and then practice visualization. Close your eyes and picture what you want your life to look like, and then make an action plan and break it down into goals, break those goals down into smaller goals, write them down, and put a date on them. There have been studies. Harvard did a study, and there's another major organization that did a study. I forget the name, but they showed that people who wrote down their goals and put a date to them were substantially more likely to achieve those goals. So, but first, like I said, it's identifying what you want to change and what you want it to look like.
I think the last question that we'll end on is, what do you hope listeners take away from your story that you want them to that you want to have stick with them after the podcast episode ends? Like, what's the ending message that you'd like to send to my listeners that have listened to the story and would like to maybe um have them stick with them?
That no matter how bad it gets, like I said, as long as you have hope, there's everything changes. Change is like the only constant. And if I was able to overcome 7 felonies, 2 prison terms, the death of my fiance, all of this, and still remain positive and want to help people and better the world, you can get over it too. Like it's not even getting over it. That was a poor choice of words, but like you can work through it. We can all heal, but it requires looking inward. There's a lot of self-reflection and reflection on what's happening, and how you feel about it. And there's a lot of identification that needs to be done before any real change can be made.
Well, Andrew, I appreciate you so much for being coming on here and sharing this story. It's been such an impactful story, and I've said it multiple times. I think you're such a huge inspiration, and um, for people that want to check this book out, I highly recommend it because this could honestly enough, this could honestly be like scratch of the surface that we've dove into. If you want to know more about his story, I highly recommend you check the book out. If people would like to support you and would like to keep updates on you about future books and everything, where's the best place that they can find you? And feel free to just promote everything that you have.
Yeah, so the book and the companion book are available for pre-order on Amazon. Just go to A Vision of Hope, A Story of Redemption and Purpose, or A Vision of Hope Reflections. You'll see it on there. You can also go to avisionofhopebook.com, subscribe to the newsletter where you can get updates on future events, on the filming of the school community once that's up and active. If you want to stay connected and stay informed of future works that are coming out, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter.
And as always, I'll put all of his links in the description box below. I'll put his website as well as social media platforms, as well as information about his book in there as well. Um, you're more than welcome to follow me on social media as well. Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. It's Noah's Podcast, so feel free to follow the podcast on those social media platforms. Keep updates on the podcast on the social media side. And as always, follow Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcasts from. It's available on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere, so feel free to subscribe to get notified of when new episodes come out. I really hope that everyone enjoyed this episode as much as I did. It's been such a huge, impactful story that I hope that it's inspired you to, take those steps of get help if you need to, and have to make this to be the point in where you can start changing your life. So I appreciate it again to Andrew for sharing this story, and that yeah, feel free to go check him out on social media's website as well. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day and week. Be safe, make good decisions, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.